They're going against it. Yeah, they're fighting. Huge numbers have passed already. That's a great story this year, way above average, and it could be the biggest count there in 20 years. Everything you can imagine likes them, and if I say too much about how people use them for bait, I could get in trouble. So I'm going to say striped bass, yes, but everything you can imagine likes to eat these fish, so they can be good for bait for all kinds of purposes. Who would benefit most from river herring coming back? I think river herring are really valuable as a forage for all kinds of fish that we use commercially and recreationally. People that fish or that consume fish can benefit from a stronger forage base. Beyond that, people who like to eat river herring now in Harwich for the first time in over 20 years have access to get a few of those fish. So people are so thankful for having that opportunity. And then lastly, fish and wildlife themselves that feed on river herring are having a stronger forage base. So I think all those things happen. I also think that they're a symbol of springtime, a symbol of renewal with natural resources. People love to go out and see them like at Stony Brook, and just they get a thrill out of seeing these fish moving upstream in the spring. So they'll benefit as well. So diatomaous fish are the sea-run fish. They're the ones that switch habitats to complete their life history. Most are born in freshwater, and they head out to the ocean to grow and mature. They need help coming and going as they enter our coastal rivers. Sea herring live in the ocean all the time, and then river herring, which is two species, both alewife and blueback herring, they're born in our freshwater rivers. They exit to the ocean where they live and mature. It was always a natural resource that came up our rivers in the springtime, and people could get food. They would arrive when there wasn't anything growing. It was hard to forage things, and these fish would show up in March and April, and it was just food from the ocean. Many fish and wildlife time their migrations to intercept the migrations of the herring. The numbers declined a lot from historical levels, going back over 100 years. And that's easy to imagine. We've changed our landscape so much on Cape Cod. So we're way down from historical levels, but really in the 50s and 60s, these numbers started to come down a little. And then there was a lot of concern in the late 1990s over plummeting numbers. And so in 2005, the Massachusetts Division of Marine Fisheries closed harvest coastwide to the spawning run harvest. And so since then, we've had some improvement, modest improvements in some rivers, and so the state has looked to opening a few rivers for spawning run harvest again. We have a partner now, the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission. If you want to open a river herring run now, you must have the state authority, which is the Division of Marine Fisheries, develop and approve a plan. Then it goes on to the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, and they have to approve the plan. So the Nemasket River in Middleborough in Lakeville has been approved. Then came Harwich, Herring River in Harwich, and then last year, Herring Brook in Pembroke was approved. So there are now 3 rivers that are approved for harvest in Massachusetts, but only Harwich has opened just a few weeks ago as the first run to open for harvest in over 20 years. Will there be other runs that might open up soon? Well, we don't have that many that are probably have enough fish to allow that. We're still well below historical levels. I would say there's probably 10 runs in Massachusetts that have enough fish that would allow the Division of Marine Fisheries to consider opening. And some of those towns are interested, but right now there's only 3 plans approved, and there's none in development as we speak. So you saw a lot of fish at Stony Brook and Brewster last week. Enormous showing right now in Brewster. It's really encouraging to see. They have over 300,000 fish in their run, and they're on the way to possibly having a time series high in 20 years. So Brewster's looking very good right now. I would say there's probably 3 other runs in the Cape that are flirting right now with 300,000 fish, and the run has a lot of time to go. So we're seeing some improvements. Last year we had 4 runs that hit time series highs in time series 15 to 20 years. So that's encouraging. What we're seeing this year is encouraging. We just have to realize, though, that in a historical view, we're still down from what we used to be. And many small runs, particularly those that use artificial mill ponds on Cape Cod, are not doing very well. They haven't really seen this rebound that we're seeing in some other places. Well, there's a lot of concepts that people are talking about. People talk about landscape alterations impacting habitat and water quality. People talk about eutrophication caused by nutrient loading from septic systems and lawn care. Absolutely, some of these smaller ponds are eutrophying, which means they're less suitable for river herring productivity. Offshore bycatch mortality is a concern that some people express. Certainly there is some bycatch in sea herring and mackerel fisheries that people consider. And then I think we also need to be careful about shore harvest as well. So I think all these things come into play. People also talk about natural mortality. We've done a very good job restoring populations of some predators and not a great job with some of their prey. The good news in a 20-year window for larger runs, we are seeing some improvements. So it's a very good question to ask, does offshore bycatch with some of these large trawlers seeking mackerel and sea herring impact river herring? And I think if we go back in time to the 1950s when we started to allow foreign fishing vessels off our coastline, large numbers of boats came from all over the place and they caught a lot of river herring as bycatch. So I would say that historical catch 50s, 60s, 70s until we kicked these boats out, probably mid-80s, was probably impactful. And so now the question is, are domestic trawlers, the foreign fleets are gone, are these domestic boats impacting river herring? And I think there's been a lot of effort done at the state level, at the federal level, to try to reduce those impacts. And that economically, it's not as favorable to pursue these fish right now as they used to. So I think we're at a good position right now, better than we've been in a long time, to reduce those offshore bycatch concerns. That said, there are still locations that are hotspots, and if the trawlers work at those hotspots, they can intersect river herring while they're out in the ocean. So it's still part of the puzzle, but I feel like we're in a pretty good position right now on this issue. I think that as we warm and as we put a lot of nutrients into the freshwater habitats where they come to spawn and for the young to grow, those habitats are becoming less productive for river herring. And on Cape Cod, there are many ponds. They used to be beautiful kettle ponds. Many of these ponds are slowly becoming degraded by this nutrient load. And when you're warm, that causes even more problems as the climate warms up. So I'm probably most concerned about those impacts at spawning and nursery habitats. But I'll acknowledge there's so much we don't know. Interactions with natural mortality, interactions with mortality in the ocean. I think things that we can work on are try to improve our freshwater habitats. Is the ocean changing? Yes, as a matter of fact, the Gulf of Maine, the Northwest Atlantic is one of the fastest warming ocean regions in the world, and it's caused by climate change. And so this is a concern. We don't know exactly what it will mean for something like river herring. There'll probably be winners and losers among aquatic life. Some will do better with a warmer ocean. But we don't know what it means for river herring, but generally warmer oceans are less productive. But there's data that shows it. This isn't speculation. There's many decades of ocean temperature data, and it is in fact warming rapidly. How do local herring runs look today, and how does that compare to where things used to be? So we have records as an agency that go back over 100 years. And over 100 years ago, there was approximately 20 runs that could have 500,000 to 1 million fish in the runs or more. And I think today we've declined a lot from there. And so we're optimistic about what we're seeing in a 20-year window, but it still lags well behind those historic levels. I would say we have probably 5 to 10 rivers presently that can have 500,000 fish. We're not that far off, but we don't have as many rivers that have those numbers. The Herring River in Harwich in 2019 had 1.2 million fish on our electric counter. That, to me, I've been around these runs since I was a kid growing up in the Cape, and to me that 2019 run was like I used to see years ago when things were strong. in the 70s. That was a strong run. For 5 weeks there were fish running hard. So I think we have the potential to get close to what is considered a healthy run, but probably not at many places as we used to see. What drives river herring to go against the outward flow in these rivers? Well, they're very instinctual. They're coming back to where they were born, and so they're cueing to certain things in the water that cause them to really want to get back to their spawning habitat where they're from. And so they're just very able to do that, and they have good capacity to swim against high flow. And they're not quite as strong a swimmers, say, salmon, but they're quite good at moving against flow. And they're very determined, as you see, to get up there. This is their chance, this is their time, and so they really work hard to get up to their spawning habitats. Some people feel the shad bush bloom is related to when river herring show up. I think the name comes from American shad, which is a cousin to river herring. But I think on the Cape we don't have American shad, but some people use that as an indicator of when river herring are showing up. So we've talked about mortality, catch, degrading habitats. Another issue that's really important, we think, is droughts and less flow. And so river herring juveniles need to stay in their freshwater habitat for 1, 2, 3 months, feeding on zooplankton. Then they head out to the ocean. But they need flow to get out to the ocean. And what we're seeing is, in recent decades, longer lasting droughts, wider periods of the year when the droughts occur, and we're seeing less surface flow. Groundwater on the Cape is related to surface flow, and we use the groundwater for our water supply. So it isn't just the climate, it's the demographics of more people coming to the Cape, to retire to the Cape, and we're using more water. And so my hypothesis would be that we're taking more water there's less water available to allow these juvenile herring to get out in the fall when they need to. You know what that big blizzard did in February? It was very short-lasting, the contribution of precipitation. We really didn't pull out of a drought in eastern Cape Cod. And I hadn't seen a spring drought like this before. So not only did that storm not help us that much, but it put so much debris in these herring runs where the fish go. So my crew has been doing so much work removing tree falls, debris jams, all that clutter that comes from those big storms had to be removed because we don't have the flows to remove that stuff out on its own. So humans need to get involved and try to help the fish out. So a lot of interactions, they're going against it. You really can't leave these fish alone. They need help getting back up to these areas from the ocean. Can locals help out with some of this work? Well, like shellfish, towns do a really good job managing certain natural resources. The authority comes to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, to the Division of Marine Fisheries, to the towns to manage shellfish and also river herring. And so we train people how to do stream maintenance in a responsible way, to not remove too much. Don't remove canopy and buffer zone vegetation, but remove stuff in the stream that actually blocks the fish. And so I think working with the town Department of Natural Resources is a way that locals can get involved. Why are river herring coming back? It's important to have a caveat with that because they're coming back in some places, they're not coming back really strong in many places. I think where there are large rivers that have decent flow and there's been restoration activity, the Division of Marine Fisheries has been very active with restoration for decades. I think a lot of other folks got involved in the last 2 decades, federal partners that have funding sources, non-governmental interest groups. So a lot of people are participating now with river herring restoration, and I think some specific sites are starting to pay off. And then also we had a harvest ban coastwide in 2006, and the numbers really steadily improved from that. We just stopped harvest, let the fish alone for 2 decades, things started to improve. So probably a combination of stewardship, restoration activity, and reduced spring spawning run mortality. So right now we don't have commercial harvest for river herring. It's just a recreational harvest, but they can use river herring as bait in commercial fisheries, small scale fisheries like striped bass. But beyond that, I think a stronger forage base supports the fisheries that support commercial fishermen as well. So it's all connected, and I think they can benefit as well for some of these species, bluefish, striped bass, hopefully codfish. What happens if we get this right or if we don't do this correctly? I do think that the plan that was written by the Division of Marine Fisheries, it targets the 10% of the time series average count of the spawning run. So that means that 90% of that run is allowed to do what they need to do. Harwich is being even more conservative, and they're saying this year we're taking 3% of the average time series count. So we're allowing 97% of the fish to go and do their thing. So I think we're being very conservative, so I don't have any concerns about over-harvesting under this plan. So I think the public stands to benefit greatly to have access to a resource that was very culturally important, very much cherished for a long time. It's been shut off for 20 years. Now there's a chance to give people some access to these fish, to eat them or to take them home and use them for bait. They're bringing kids, and kids are getting a chance to dip net herring for the first time in 20 years, and you should see the smiles on these kids. So I think it's very festive, it's very positive, and I hope it's a lesson for other towns on how to manage a river herring harvest.